Sorry to interrupt. I'll just ask Dr. Garishma to share her slides first.
Can you share her slides?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, good. Yes, seen. Yes, proceed, Grishma.
Okay, Grishma, just I was asking about the presenting complaints. Okay, you have
Yes,
discussed the two symptoms. They are the weakness and the paresthesia.
Yes.
So I told that one is for a negative symptom, that is weakness. The other one is a positive symptom. What is the positive symptom here?
Paresthesia, sir.
Paresthesia. Considering the weakness, what will be the, in relation to the weakness, what will be the positive symptom? See, what will be the negative symptom in relation to paresthesia?
Absent sensation. Sir.
Yes. But what do you call it? You can either say it anesthesia, isn't it? Anesthesia or hypoesthesia, hypoalgesia, hypothermia, isn't it? All this because each symptoms can come in a different manner depending upon the part of the nervous system getting affected, isn't it?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so similarly, weakness is weakness due to the muscle problem. Okay, and there can be a positive symptom also. Positive symptom with regard to the weakness, that is the motor manifestation is seizures, isn't it? One seizure, different types of movements. They are all positive symptoms. And what are the other positive sensory symptoms? Can you say any other positive symptom?
One minute, sir. Now, Grishma, you have mentioned that there are what type of weakness you have mentioned in this slide, whether it's a proximal muscle weakness or a distal muscle weakness you have shown here.
This is a proximal muscle weakness, ma'am.
Excellent. Okay, so you have established a proximal muscle weakness in this child. What are the 2 points? Child able, the difficulty in getting up from sitting posture.
I think she will present. She will continue her presentation. So
this is actually proximal muscle weakness.
Very
the child is having difficulty in getting up from sitting posture. That indicate that that have the thigh muscles and the proximal muscles are involved, but was able to wear chapels. That means the distal muscles are functioning. And in the upper limbs also, child was able to hold pen and was able to feed herself. She can lift her hand till elbow, but was not able to raise the hand above head. That muscles around the shoulder joints are involved, and she was able to the distal. She was able to hold the pen and hold the comb, but not able to comb her hair because she is not able to lift her hand above the shoulder.
Very good. Okay, you can proceed to the next slide. Next slide. Next slide.
So she was able to hold her neck. She was able to hold her neck normally and able to take breath normally. The weakness initially, the child noticed the weakness initially after exercise. That is, she went to swimming, and after the swimming class only she noticed the weakness.
Okay.
No diurnal variation for the weakness.
What disease produces diurnal variation?
Myasthenia gravis, ma'am.
Excellent. Proceed.
Also, she complained of floppiness since 2 days. That means she was bedridden for 2 days, and she felt heaviness of her hands and legs. There is no loosening of dress or tightening, which indicate there is no atrophy or hypertrophy of muscles. And other symptom also complaints of paresthesia of right upper limb. No other anesthesia sensory symptoms. No girdle sensations.
Yes, proceed.
And there is no anosmia, symptoms pertaining to cranial nerves. There is no normal vision, no double vision, no drooping of eyelids, normal chewing, no drooling of saliva while drinking from cup. But she was complaining that there is some difficulty to drink juice with using straw from the glass, and mother complains that child is not fully closing her eyes while sleeping. No nasal regurgitation of feed, no nasal twang of voice or hoarseness of voice. There is no urinary incontinence or increase.
Now we have talked about the cranial nerves. From this history, what cranial nerve is probably affected? You have a feel?
Yes, ma'am. I
Child
feel
mother
like
complains,
7
child not fully
Finish.
closing her eyes while sleeping. So you're thinking in terms of
facial nerve weakness, ma'am.
yes, okay. There is no nasal regurgitation, no nasal twang, no hoarseness of voice. So you're ruling out cranial nerve involvement due to which cranial nerves have been not
9,
involved.
10,
You think? Huh? Yes.
9, 10 cranial nerves, ma'am.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Proceed. Yes.
There is no urinary incontinence or no increased nocturnal frequency of micturition.
Okay. So bladder involvement is not there.
Not there.
Bowel habits.
Bowel habits also normal, ma'am. She's
So bladder and bowel are not involved, and child has got a proximal muscle weakness with paresthesia, with
Yes,
facial involvement probably. Yes. Next.
there is no history of fever,
Okay,
headache,
very
no history of
important point. There is no history of fever. Now,
fever.
all of us know that it's a case of acute flaccid paralysis. We are talking about acute flaccid paralysis with the fever. What are the probable conditions you will think in terms of?
If with fever, poliomyelitis can
Okay.
come fever.
But polio is very rare nowadays. So next common thing is
And other
Non-polio
enterovirus, ma'am.
very good. Yes, very fantastic answer. Yes, non-polio enteroviruses you can think. Then closest.
Other
You
transverse
think in
myelitis
terms
also
very good.
initially
Yes.
will
So
they start-
polio, non-polio, transverse myelitis, very good. Yes. Other conditions with fever.
and Guillain-Barré, they can have fever 10 days
No,
before.
Guillain-Barré, no fever is one of the Ashbury's criteria. No, so fever is not there in Guillain-Barré at present. Maybe
Yes.
child would have had fever 2 weeks back. Okay, so Guillain-Barré, there is no fever as per your Ashbury's criteria. Okay, so you have brought out some good points. Polio, non-polio enteroviruses, transverse myelitis, myositis, epidural abscesses, hot spine. These are the conditions where you can have fever with acute flaccid paralysis. Yes, proceed.
There is no history of myalgia.
Okay.
No history of any trauma. There is no neck pain or no girdle sensation.
Girdle pains are very characteristic of
Transverse myelitis.
transverse myelitis. Very good. Yes.
No toxin intake. No history
What
of
toxin you asked?
lead.
How can you ask? Yes.
Lead and arsenic are the toxins.
Arsenic. Okay. Yes. These are the two toxins associated with EP. But what history probably you would have asked? You can't ask whether they took arsenic. Anything for lead?
Paint.
Common scenario where lead poisoning can occur is
Paint, ma'am. By
paint, pencils, working near factory, residing near lead factories. Yes. Okay. So no history of no, you think that these are the two poisons, lead and arsenic poisons. Okay, very good. Next you have asked an important history. No history of snake bite. Very good. What snakes, which type of snake bite is likely to produce AFP?
neurotoxic.
No, yeah, that's what. What are the two snakes which are likely to produce AFP?
Cobra.
Very good, excellent. Cobra and crate.
Great.
Okay, cobra and crate. Vipers are unlike, they are more likely to produce hemorrhagic manifestations rather than neurotoxic manifestations. Any peculiarity of snake bite with paralysis? Along with paralysis, what are the other common findings they might have?
They will have partial ptosis.
Very good, excellent, very good. Ptosis. Ptosis is a very characteristic feature of AFP and there's usually painful. Whenever you have a muscle weakness with pain and ptosis, always think in terms of snake bite. Very good. Next point.
No history of abdominal pain, no psychiatric manifestations.
Why did you ask for this?
To rule out
in terms of porphyria. Okay, you're thinking in terms of porphyria. Porphyria is a very rare phenomenon. But what drugs in children can precipitate such abdominal pain in children with porphyria? Commonly used drugs which can precipitate porphyria. Is commonly used for convulsions. Any drug? Barbiturates. Okay. Barbiturates, sulfa, and tricyclic antidepressants. These are the three drugs which can precipitate episodes of abdominal pain in children with porphyria, right? Proceed.
Yes. A child reached hospital on day 3 of illness. According to mother, given a costly medication on the day of admission, and from day 2 of admission, a child started to improve and started walking with support on day 3. Past history, no history of fever with cough or fast breathing or diarrhea 2 weeks before.
As and when you ask, you just tell me why you are asking for this. History of fever with cough or fast breathing, for what?
This is for ma'am, in Guillain-Barré syndrome, they can have the diarrhea with Campylobacter jejuni or like Mycoplasma pneumoniae.
Very good.
They have a infection.
Yeah.
So to rule out that, I have asked. And
Campylobacter jejuni is more common in which type of Guillain-Barré? Subtype of, I mean, more commonly associated with Aman or AADP? It's more commonly associated with?
AIDP.
No, Aman. Which is more common in our country, Aman or AADP? Developing country like India?
AIDP, ma'am.
No, it is AMAN, which is more common in India. That's why diarrhea, Campylobacter jejuni, all that we are asking. Yes, proceed. Good. Very good answer. Mycoplasma and Campylobacter jejuni, you wanted to rule out. Very good. Next.
No history of throat pain or patch in the tonsil. This
Why
I
did you
want to
ask?
rule out diphtheria, ma'am.
Okay. Very good. Post-diphtheritic paralysis. What is the peculiarity of post-diphtheritic paralysis?
Usually unilateral single.
Ascending or descending? Diphtheritic paralysis. Yes.
Descending, ma'am.
Descending. And how many weeks after diphtheria you usually get paralysis?
2 weeks.
3 to 5 weeks. Okay. Usually after 3 to 5 weeks of diphtheria, we usually get a paralysis. Yes, proceed.
No history of exposure to toxins, lead, even organophosphorus poisoning, ma'am. There is no.
Okay. Yes.
That they can present with the intermediate syndrome.
Yes. Good. Very good. Yes.
No history of vaccination prior to the disease, like flu vaccine, rabies, or any meningococcal vaccine type C can cause the.
More. I want you to tell me some more vaccines. Flu and rabies. Rabies we are not going to give routinely. Flu, okay, yes, I accept. Some other CNS vaccines.
Meningococcal.
Which can affect the nervous system. Yes. Some more vaccines which we commonly use. Flu, rabies, very good. Next. Can MMR produce demyelination?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. Then any other vaccine? TD vaccine, which we give by, for example, this child is 12 years old or 11 years old.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the vaccine we give at 10 years?
TD.
TD you give. Okay. But this child is going to swimming class and all that. Probably it would have received TD or TDAP.
She received TD, ma'am, at 10 years.
Okay, doesn't matter. Okay, if they are financially well off, they can also receive a TD. Next dose of TD is due for her when? 10 years she has received. Yes. Next dose is due by? Okay. Well, usual schedule, not 10 and 16 years.
16.
Okay, yes. So the vaccines which can produce this problem of flu, rabies, MMR can produce. TD vaccines can also produce. Yes, proceed. Next.
No history of fever with rashes or arthralgia. This I want to rule out any vasculitis, SLE.
Very good. SLE you wanted to rule out. Yes.
And there is no history of any
other viral infections without arthralgia. Rashes. What are the conditions with rashes? Fever with rash and then going in for AFP.
This even other viruses, ma'am, Epstein, EBV infection.
Rashes.
Cytomegalovirus.
And any virus which can produce conjunctivitis, rash, and hand, foot, mouth disease. What is the virus?
Coxsackie virus, ma'am.
Which specific any number, adeno 70, 71 can usually produce hand, foot, mouth disease, conjunctivitis, and this is the rashes in the form of hand, foot, mouth disease. You can produce conjunctivitis and this problem. Okay. Yes. Next, proceed.
Family history, no history of early stroke, cardiac disease in the family.
No history of surgery in the near past. Why did you ask that?
Like after some surgeries, like fat reduction surgeries and like Guillain-Barré syndrome reported, ma'am.
No, it is a surgery which is important or anesthesia which you give which can precipitate AFP. And which type of anesthesia? Usually, I thought you had asked this question because epidural anesthesia can go in for flaccid paralysis. That's why I thought you had asked it. Okay. Yes, proceed.
Family history, no history of early stroke, no cardiac disease in the
In
family.
the past history, I would have liked you to ask some other questions also, some things which you have missed. Any history of injections in the past? What are the 4 DDs for AFP? Main common DDs for AFP?
Poliomyelitis, acute poliomyelitis,
Yes.
transverse myelitis.
Myelitis, yes.
uh,
Next one is your Guillain-Barré, you have told already. Then 4th one is traumatic neuritis. Usually for traumatic neuritis, we ask for a history of any history of injections given in the gluteal region. Don't we ask? Yes, we do ask. So you could have included that point, history of injections in the past. Then one more thing, if it's a small child less than 2 years or anything, we also ask for history of any injection of canned food, honey. For what?
Botulism.
Very good. Okay, for that
Botulism,
also, yeah, for that also can produce AFP. That history also we ask. Okay, yes.
Manju sir, you want to ask any question, sir?
No, continue. No problem. I'll ask later. No problem. Continue.
Okay.
Antenatal history, preterm baby, 37 weaker by normal vaginal delivery with a birth weight of 1.9 kg at 34 weeks, cried soon after birth, no neonatal seizures, and postnatal was also uneventful. Development normal for age, now studies in 7th standard, good scholastic and child is good in sports. Immunization.
Yes.
Fully immunized for age. Last year, the 10-year TD vaccine is taken. BCG scar is present. OPV, all doses are taken. Last OPV was taken at when child was 5 years of age. Along with the pulse polio immunization.
Okay, very good. Yes.
Nutrition required calories is 1900 kilocalories and protein 14 gram. Child is getting 1700 kilocalories and 30 gram proteins by 24-hour recall method. Now the feeding, there is no nasal regurgitation of feeds and child is able to feed by herself.
Okay.
Socioeconomic status, lower middle class family according to modified Kupsami scale.
Okay.
So at the end of history, this is a 12-year-old child coming with acute onset of weakness, mainly involving the proximal muscles.
Okay, very good.
And it is like an ascending weakness, initially started from lower limb, then involving upper limb. There is no involvement of neck muscles and muscles for respiration. And from history, the looking like a facial nerve involvement. Bilateral facial nerve involvement is there, and
Okay. So I think in neurological cases, it would be ideal to go for an evaluation at the time of history itself, because we always say in neurology that you can make a diagnosis in the history. And after if you can't make a diagnosis, that means your history is incomplete. So by this history, what are the diagnostic points? Because in neurology, the diagnosis that we do are the first we go for the functional diagnosis, that what the child is having, what are the neuraxis or the part of the neuraxis that is affected. Second, we go for the anatomical diagnosis, that is your most dreaded part of the neurology, that is the localization. Then third, we go for the etiological diagnosis. So this is the way which you must be. Then you can tell the other additional manifestations. Okay. So first, what is the part of the body affected? That is the functional diagnosis. So already you have mentioned it. Just say once again. Usually we try to term those terminologies for a functional diagnosis. What is your functional diagnosis here? It is not the functional classification of the cerebral palsy that we use, but this is the functional category. What are the functions affected? That is it. Tell Sri Lakshmi also can contribute. Tell Sri Lakshmi, what is the functional diagnosis here?
So case of acute flaccid paralysis
Involving S,
involving the
predominantly
lower
the
limbs.
lower limbs and upper limbs plus
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 paresthesia is there, sir.
Plus the
yes,
facial
yes, paresthesia, then
the facial nerve palsy, sir.
and one is
Bifacial
it a
palsy.
bilateral or a unilateral?
Bifacial.
Bifacial palsy, isn't it? Okay, so there is an upper limb weakness, lower limb weakness, and bifacial. Suppose there is a no bifacial palsy is there. What in which functional diagnosis you can categorize it? You can tell it as a quadriplegia. Is it because both the upper limbs are affected, both the lower limbs are affected? So it is a sort of a quadriplegia with the bifacial palsy. Okay. So,
Yes.
but in this case, because it is you also are telling it is there is a proximal involvement. Why do you say that there is proximal involvement?
Child has difficulty in standing up from sitting position.
Okay, so child has difficulty getting up from standing position. Usually, for that, what are the muscles required for standing up from sitting position? Just imagine how you will stand up from a sitting position, because you have to extend, isn't it? You have to step. First of all, what you have to do, you have to stabilize your back. So your axial muscle is required. Then, so that means the axial extensors must be required. Then you have to extend your hip, and then you have to extend your knee. So these muscles, very good. Somebody has written as buttock and thigh muscles. That is in a simplified manner. That is, but it is the hip. That means hip extensors, back extensors, and the knee extensors are required, isn't it? So here, and to say whether there is a knee, other additional knee involvement is there, to know whether it is a little more involvement extending into the proximal towards the distal part. What other symptom you will ask?
Buckling of knees.
Very good. Buckling of the knee. Yes, buckling of the knee also will be a manifestation of a proximal muscle weakness. And why do you say that there is no distal muscle weakness here?
She could
Did you
wear
ask specifically?
chappals. She could wear chappals, hold a pen in her hand.
Okay, okay. So she has, she can wear the chappals, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Able to hold also. That is fantastic. But usually in such situation, they may have difficulty using the chappals also. Again, all these weakness can be due to upper motor neuron or a lower motor neuron weakness, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Because suppose you think that there is difficulty wearing the chappal, can it be due to upper limb, upper motor neuron weakness or a lower motor neuron weakness?
Both, sir. It can be.
Very good, excellent. Because of the upper motor neuron as well as because of the lower motor neuron, there can be a problem in wearing the chappals. And when there is a wearing of chappals are present, then how will you differentiate from them? Because I told you that you have to differentiate the localization from the history itself. Then a person says that I am having difficulty wearing a chappal, even a child, because in this case you have started with a very good point that you have taken the history from both the mother as well as the child. Many times the pediatricians as well as the postgraduates, I understand that even if it is a 12-year-old boy or a girl, adolescents who are having their own self-esteem, most of the time you people forget to ask the history from the children. So in this case, you have told that you have taken the history from the child and the mother. It is definitely a good thing, so that you can get additional points from the child. Okay, so in this case, how will you differentiate whether the upper motor neuron or a lower motor neuron weakness of the foot muscles? So you think, because in upper motor neuron, what is the cardinal manifestation of upper motor neuron? What is the cardinal manifestation of an upper motor neuron? Usually. But there are always exceptions. But what is the cardinal manifestation? One is spasticity, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Because spasticity. Because when there is spasticity, there is no question that it will not be lower motor neuron. It's always upper motor neuron, isn't it? But when there is hypotonia, you all have some confusion, because it can be a central hypotonia or a peripheral hypotonia. Okay. That's it. Second thing is that you to know whether it is an upper motor neuron weakness or a lower motor neuron, just to see how the patient is able to slip in the chapel, isn't it? Because in upper motor neuron, the main thing, there may not be a severe weakness, only mild weakness. And one thing that is lost in the upper motor neuron weakness, we call it as just look my hand. It is the kinetic melody, because when you are going to do something, you can't do it in that perfect manner. So in this case also, because they are going to put in their chapels, they can't put the chapel properly. And then what else they have to do? They have to grip the chapel. And that there again, because when they try, some toes will be adducted, some will be abducted. So they will not be able to negotiate the toes. And then they are trying to hold it, they can't hold it properly. And while they are walking also, this will just slip away. And when they have put it, then if they want to try pull the foot out, again they have difficulty, because there is that we can get it as the kinetic melody. Okay, so what will happen when there is a lower motor neuron? Lower motor neuron, you know that there is a finger weakness is there. The adductors, the toes are in an abducted slide, because it is the interosseous muscles, isn't it? It's the intrinsic muscles will be more affected in a distal weakness. That is, what is the usual cause for a distal weakness? Distal weakness. What is the commonest cause for a distal weakness?
Peripheral neuropathy.
Yes, peripheral neuropathy. Very good. Because why do you get a distal weakness in peripheral neuropathy? It is a long nerves that will be affected. See, because it is the long nerve, and because of that longest one, the lower limb nerves are longest one. That is why in a peripheral neuropathies, when the lower limbs are affected, you get foot drop, you get distal wasting. Till when the involvement occurs up to the knee, then only the upper limb start appearing, involving. This again because of a length dependent involvement, because length dependent involvement. That is why peripheral neuropathies, you get a distal involvement. And in this case, because you have a distal weakness because of the peripheral neuropathy, the distalmost muscles, that is the interosseous and the intrinsic foot muscles are affected. So you can't, because there is not much sparsity, easily they can put the foot in, but they want to hold the toes, they cannot hold it, because the toes are weak and it is separated, because interosseous are weak, it is abducted, so they can't hold it properly. And when they want to pull out the foot also, they don't have much difficulty. So what is the difference between upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron? Foot weakness, by just asking for a putting of chapels, how can you differentiate upper motor neuron from lower motor neuron? Just repeat.
There will be difficulty in wearing as well as removal of the chapels in upper motor neuron lesions.
Okay.
In lower motor neuron lesions.
Yes. Okay. Tell me.
Can easily wear the chapels, but
slip in. Okay.
Will be slipping. The interosseous are weak, so they won't be able to hold it like properly, because the the fingers will be like abducted position.
Okay. So this way you can identify the lower distal weakness, and you can identify whether it is an upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron weakness. In this case, do you have any other point? Because in this case, one more point you can utilize to identify whether it is an upper motor neuron or a lower motor neuron. In this case, any clue you have to say that it is an upper motor neuron or a lower motor neuron?
Proximal to distal.
Most important point. Pardon? What will you get usually in a peripheral neuropathy? Peripheral neuropathy. What will be the additional symptom other than weakness? You have that symptom here also.
Child is having paresthesia, sir.
Paresthesia. It's a sensory symptom. Will you get a sensory symptom in an upper motor neuron lesion? No, usually not. But if you have additional sensory tract involvement, this may be there. But in this case, because you have a paresthesia, definitely it is most probably, if it is there, that is it. If paresthesia with weakness, which will be usually in a symmetrical manner, because bilateral, distal, symmetrical manner, usually it will be possible. Okay, in peripheral neuropathies. What are the different type of peripheral neuropathies, you know?
Peripheral polyneuropathy.
Very good.
Mono,
What is meant by polyneuropathy? Very
affecting
good.
multiple nerves, sir, more than two.
No, it is uniformly affected, but the distal part of the peripheral nerves are affected. I told you that dying back phenomena, that is the peripheral polyneuropathy. Okay, then you have the there you get the distal weakness, glow and stalking type of distribution.
Yes.
Okay, then what else? What other type of peripheral neuropathies?
Mononeuropathy is multiplex.
Yes, there can be a mononeuropathy, simple mononeuropathy, where a single nerve is affected. Okay, then what will be the difference between that peripheral neuropathy and peripheral polyneuropathy and mononeuropathy?
Asymmetry. The peripheral polyneuropathy will be symmetrical and distal. Mononeuropathy symmetrical and unilateral.
It is in a particular nerve distribution. If ulnar nerve is affected, ulnar nerve distribution. Radial nerve is affected, radial nerve distribution. Like this. You have only a wrist drop or a foot drop. It will be usually unilateral, but there can be multifocal mononeuropathy also you can get. In that case, you will get peripheral nerves in a mononeural nerves in a different, in a varying manner, asymmetrical manner. That is what is the classical example of a mononeuropathy multiplex?
Leprosy.
Ancient disease.
Leprosy, sir.
Yes, leprosy. Is it present now or eradicated?
Eradicated.
No, still it's there in India. What is the program for eradicating leprosy called? I think it is there in Kerala. I don't know. The Dr. Lakshmi, is there any program?
No, it has not been eradicated. It's a very active program. Surveillance is more active, but the number of diseases has come down. And we do have pediatric leprosies also.
Yes. Do you know that program in Kerala? It is called as Ashwamedham. Ashwamedham, because we are having a Ashwamedham fight.
Yagam. It is like a yagam.
Yes. That's it.
Okay, very good.
Just to make aware of these things. Okay, so in this case, we have a proximal weakness, isn't it? I'll just conclude. Proximal weakness, isn't it? So in upper limb, where do you say there is proximal weakness?
This child had difficulty in, child was not able to comb her hair because she was not able to lift her hand above the head.
Okay, that shows that it's a proximal weakness. Then why do you say that she doesn't have any distal weakness in the upper limb?
She is able to hold, sir, hold pen, hold.
Okay, she is able to hold the comb, but not able to raise and comb with the same single act. You can identify that, isn't it? Because holding the comb is possible, but raising the hand is not possible. That is the simplest thing. So there is a bilateral, and that is bilateral, isn't it? Bilateral.
Bilateral.
Okay, she has bilateral. Bilateral. Okay. So in this case, she has bilateral. So is it now the next thing? So the part affected are the proximal, upper limb and lower limb. There is bifacial palsy is there. Then she has paresthesia. That is in which part of the limb it is there?
Right upper limb, sir.
Only in the right upper limb.
Only in right upper limb.
It should have been, according to our description, which I told you, it should have been bilateral, isn't it?
Bilateral, yes.
Bilateral glow and stalking type of distribution. Why this child is having only on one side, right side only? Right side only. Okay, that is how do you explain? Because one thing ultimately in medicine, you can say that, sir, it can happen. I don't have any explanation. That possibility is there because that is medicine. That is human life. Yeah? There can be a lot of variations. Your descriptions may not fit always. But in medicine, in modern medicine, we try to explain everything in a scientific manner. So how can you explain this in a scientific manner in this case? Okay, tell me. Pardon?
Faciocervicobrachial involvement.
No. You other those things are the final diagnosis. We are now only in the characterization of the part of the nervous system that is affected. Here, you have a paresthesia. According to the symptomatology that we have discussed, a possibility may be a bilateral distal blow and stalking type of distribution symptomatology. But here, paresthesia. When do you get paresthesia? That is what I was asking initially itself. What are the etiologies for a paresthesia? See, paresthesia means it is a positive symptom, isn't it? Because she is having a positive symptom when somebody touches, isn't it? So she have a feeling of some other symptoms, isn't it? Okay, and that is it is coming up in a spontaneous manner also. And this one can occur because of the two types. You have two types of neurons. It's peripheral nerves. They have a large fiber, which are myelinated neurons, and you have a small myelinated neurons and unmyelinated neurons. What is the function of an unmyelinated neuron? Thin unmyelinated, that is the pain sensitive neurons, isn't it? Yes. And myelinated large fibers, what are the functions?
Vibration sense, positions.
Very good. That is the position vibration sense. And usually any other function of a large myelinated fiber, because the muscle spindle afferents, isn't it? The muscle spindle afferents are also large type 1A fiber. They are also myelinated fibers. So when you have this involvement of the large fibers, you get more of a paresthesia. So when you are getting an involvement of small myelinated or unmyelinated, because which are the pain and temperature carrying, you get a pins and needle type of sensations. So again, you see from the symptomatology itself, you know which are the neurons affected here, because you are telling that the child is having paresthesia. From that, again, you can understand it will be where will be the involvement?
Large myelinated neurons.
Large myelinated fibers. Okay, so that is it. So that we'll keep it here. You will have a usefulness for that also. Now we'll go to the next part. So the child has a proximal involvement. So finally, where can you localize? Where do you localize?
Peripheral nerve, sir.
In lower, first of all, you say that it's a lower motor neuron.
Lower motor neuron.
Yes.
Why do you say that? Yes, Dr. Lakshmi, you can intervene.
Yes, element. So you're localizing it to element, and in the element type, what are all the parts of an element lesion? Starting from
anterior spinal nucleus.
Okay. Next, anterodorsal, then
The nerve root.
Yes.
Peripheral nerve, neuromuscular junction, and the muscle.
Okay. Now, where are you localizing it? Probably for this child.
Peripheral nerve, ma'am.
Okay. Nerve root or peripheral nerve?
Root or peripheral nerve.
Okay, that's what. Very good. Now proceed with the general examination.
Well-looking child, vitals, pulse rate of 88 per minute, blood pressure 110/60 millimeters of mercury in lying down position, and sitting 108/60 millimeters of mercury. There is no postural hypotension.
You are very specific about this postural hypotension, BP, respiratory rate, single breath count. For what purpose? You do vitals for everybody, but specifically you have looked for sitting and lying down BP. Any particular reason?
To see for any autonomic symptoms, ma'am.
Okay.
Autonomic
what are all the autonomic problems a child with probable GBS can have?
They will have
Can expect. Yes, very good. Yes.
Postural hypotension.
Yes. Hypertension can we have?
Even hypertension they can have.
Hypotension, orthostatic hypertension, arrhythmias. Yes. Then what are the other systems also? What are the other autonomic dysfunction? What happens to the sweating?
Sweating will be there.
They might have sweating. Okay. Now the single breath count. Very good that you have documented a single breath count of 25 per minute. It's a 12-year-old child. Okay. When will you be alarmed by this? This is a very important test which you have done. And when will you be alarmed by the single breath count?
If it is not able to if not able to count till 15.
10 to 15. Okay.
10 to 15.
10 per minute. Okay, good. Proceed. Yes.
Temperature 98 degree Fahrenheit.
Yes.
No, normal. No pallor, jaundice, cyanosis, clubbing or edema. No
Yes.
dysmorphic facies. BCG scar is present. No neurocutaneous markers. No skull and spine normal. No tenderness. No gibbous. No spinous tenderness.
Okay, very good. Yes.
Anthropometry.
Hmm.
Weight is 40 kilogram. Normal for
Proceed with the CNS examination. Yes.
CNS examination. Higher mental functions are normal. Cranial nerves, there is no anosmia. The second nerve, it's normal, including the fundus examination as normal. No features of any papilledema or optic neuritis.
1 minute, 1 second. See, Sri Lakshmi or Grishma, whomsoever. Now, this you did fundus examination as a routine. Where you looking, you already have by your history itself. Now, sir has clearly told you it's arising from the peripheral nerve or the nerve root is probably the site of lesion. We are thinking in terms of any particular reason you look for papilledema or optic neuritis.
Multiple sclerosis.
Is papilledema common in a case of GBS? Can it occur or no? It has nothing to do with the GBS. Papilledema and GBS, any relationship? Is it common? Can it occur or no?
Can occur.
Can occur? Can occur commonly? No, it is very,
Not
very
commonly.
rare, but can occur. Any reason for why papilledema can be there? In GBS especially? Because of the increased, yes, not due, somebody has answered Miller Fisher, no. It is not due, it is probably due to the increased proteins, which is present in GBS, hyperproteinemia, which can rarely produce papilledema. Optic neuritis and your case, any significance?
Multiple sclerosis, rule of multiple sclerosis.
Yes.
And also other cause like neuromyelitis optica.
Optica, very good, yes. So there's no features of either optic neuritis or papilledema. Yes, proceed.
The eye movements are normal. There is no ophthalmoplegia. 3, 4, 6 normal. Fifth nerve, Georgia just elicitable, normal. There is no.
Okay. Yes.
There is bifacial palsy is there, bilateral facial.
So how did you make out this bifacial palsy?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, it is when there is no, the nasolabial folds are actually flat. When she smiles, it is labial folds are flat. There is no burring of eyelashes when tightly close her eyes.
Okay.
And
that is an important finding. Somebody has already asked in the chat, how did you make out this facial palsy? When the eyes are tightly closed, there's no burring of eyelashes. Very good.
No burring of eyelashes.
Element facial palsy or Neumann facial palsy?
Element facial palsy, ma'am.
Bilateral element facial palsy.
Element facial palsy.
Okay. How do you differentiate bilateral element facial palsy from bilateral Neumann facial palsy? Very difficult, but
in UMN upper motor neuron palsy.
In element facial palsy, which part is spared? Unilateral element facial palsy, which part is spared? Upper half of the face is spared, isn't it?
Upper part is spared.
Now it is bilateral facial palsy, upper half is also affected. Okay. So how do you differentiate it from UMN facial palsy?
In UMN, ma'am, this no burring of eyelashes when they close.
Okay. Yes.
Very normal.
Yes. Anything else? What do you mean by mimic palsy? The emotional fibers are spared in which palsy? UMN or LMN?
Facial palsy. In UMN?
Yes. Good. Very good. But this is very common. Bilateral, it's very rare for us in pediatrics to get bilateral, except in GBS, we don't see this condition commonly at all. Emotion is preserved. Somebody has rightly answered in the chat box. Very good. It is only, this is how we usually differentiate. Sir, would you like to add anything, sir? Mohammed, sir?
Yes, one point that all students have to understand is that the bifacial palsy, because just like bifacial upper motor neuron and bifacial lower motor neuron, because both have almost similar manifestation.
Yeah.
But only, similar 2 points that you have to remember is one, because upper motor neuron facial, as I have said for the lower limb, it is the functional part of the movement is affected. But in lower motor neuron, it is the quantity that you can't move at all. That is it. So it is a quality that is affected in lower motor neuron, and quantity is affected in upper motor neuron. So
Okay.
quality in upper motor neuron and quantity affected in lower motor. That means even in a patient with bilateral upper motor neuron facial palsy, they will be able to do most of the activities we can do, because the characteristic feature condition is suitable for palsy, where they may be able to use the lips, they may be able to again if we ask them, they may be able to move the lips, but the ultimate movement will be defective. They will have dysarthria, they have drooling, those things will be there. But as in this case, when it is very mild in an lower motor neuron and upper motor neuron, just like the most important point is that, as you have said, if there is a mimic facial palsy, you just crack a joke and there is a movement.
Yes, ma'am.
That is definitely upper motor, because in voluntary, if you ask the patient to show the teeth, she is not able to show it. But you crack a joke and there is movement, so that means it is upper motor neuron. Then second thing is that you just remember the upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron basic, that reflexes, because reflexes will be retained or brisk in upper motor neuron and reflexes will be absent, because in lower motor neuron it is the final common pathway that is affected. So when you are going to elicit a jaw jerk, because you know that bilateral facial palsy means the lesion must be above pons, so you get a brisk jaw jerk. If brisk jaw jerk is there, definitely it is more in favor of a upper motor neuron. Again, you can look at the facial reflexes, see glabellar tap or a snout reflex, palmomental. If these reflexes are elicitable or brisk, definitely it will be a upper motor neuron facial pulse. In a lower motor neuron facial pulse, you won't be able to elicit these because reflexes will be lost, because the final
very
common
valid
pathway
point
is
brought out by sir. It is very valid point brought out by sir. Two classical findings he has said. Now he has told us how to differentiate bilateral human for LMN facial pulse. Very good. Proceed, Grishma.
The gag reflex is normally present, ma'am.
Yes.
And in motor
Okay.
system,
When you are telling gag reflex is normally present, automatically you should, there's no pooling of secretions, the palatal movements are normal, all that you should automatically add. Okay.
yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Motor system examination, bulk of the muscle is normal bilaterally. Tone, there is mild hypotonia in all four limbs.
Yes.
Power, muscles of upper limb, around the wrist and elbow, right and left, it is 4/5. Around shoulder joint, it is bilaterally 3/5. And neck muscles, normal power 5/5. Abdominal muscles also 5/5. Muscles of lower limb around hip joint, it is adductors, abductors, and extensors. It is 2/5, and around knee also it is 2/5. Dorsiflexors and plantar flexors of foot are normal, 5/5. When the extensor hallucis longus, that's also 5/5. Reflex, the superficial reflexes, plantar reflex, bilateral equivocal.
Oh.
And, deep tendon reflexes are absent. All deep tendon reflexes are absent.
Okay. Good.
Right side.
So what is the inference? Yes, proceed.
Then in the motor system, the coordination of movements are normal. No involuntary movements, no fasciculations of muscles. Then in the sensory system examination, sensory examination was normal, including vibration sense, position sense. There is no signs of any meningeal irritation. Skull and spine was normal. No gibbous, no sinus or anything. Peripheral nerves normal. There is no thickening. Other system examinations, in the respiratory system, the chest expansion was normal, 5 centimeter, and movement of chest was normal, ma'am.
Okay. For abdomen, soft, no abdomen. Okay. You have completed your examination. Sum up your findings, please. Now.
Yes, ma'am.
History you have already summed up. Now you just sum up the findings alone.
In the findings, ma'am, we have the child is having proximal muscle weakness because even the muscles of lower limb around the hip joint, it is 2/5 only, and around the shoulder also 3/5. So mainly involving the proximal muscles, and there is areflexia. The deep tendon reflexes are absent, and the cranial nerve examination, there is bifacial palsy. There is no involvement of any neck muscles, and even the gag reflex was normal. And there is sensory, though there was a sensory symptom, the examination was normal. There is the even vibration position sense was normal.
Okay. Now, what is your probable diagnosis in this child?
This is the localizing to lower motor neuron, and
Okay.
from the history, it is a one hypotonia is there, acute flaccid paralysis.
Okay. It is a case of acute flaccid paralysis. Probable etiology.
Is my first.
Madam, before going into the etiology, I think they must have why she has arrived at that localization and the muscle, the probable etiology. We have to have a localization, because in this case, because she has found out that facial palsy, it has become easier. Otherwise, it would have been a little more difficult. For example, suppose the child comes with a paraplegia or a quadriplegia. In that case, they have to differentiate between various other possibilities, isn't it? So
Yes.
it can be, suppose it is a quadriplegia, where can be the lesion?
Even the spinal cord, cervical spine.
Yes, it can be in the spinal cord also. That is in the cervical spinal cord. That is again one of the DD of an IFP. What is that DD? Transverse myelitis, isn't it?
Myelitis anyway.
Yes. Why it is not a transverse myelitis? Tell others.
No sensory level here, sir, on examination.
Yes, but you had some sensory symptoms initially on examination, but you did not find any sensory level. Okay, what is the next point? That
And
it is
all the deep tendon reflexes were absent, even knee jerk, ankle jerk, all were.
But here only 3 days history, isn't it?
Yes,
3
sir.
days history. So the reflexes may be sluggish. Why do you get sluggish absent reflexes in a transverse myelitis in the acute flaccid paralysis state?
Neuronal shock.
Very good. Yes. Neuronal shock. Yes.
Spinal shock. You use the term spinal shock. Okay,
Spinal.
then. So it can be, so reflexes can be lost. Then what is the other point to say that
Most
in this
important
case,
one.
Tell me. It is not a spinal cord. Most important point.
Bowel and bladder involvement. Very
No
good.
bladder involvement.
Yes, you have already mentioned that.
No sensory level. No girdle sensations.
And no girdle sensation, no bowel and bladder sensation, bladder involvement. So these are the points against spinal cord. So it is not in the spinal cord. Now, is it an anterior horn cell disease?
No.
Which anterior horn cell disease can present in this manner?
Like acute poliomyelitis and non-poliomyelitis also.
Yes. A polio or a non-polio enteroviral myelitis. Even though we call it as the myelitis, it is the anterior horn cell, because anterior horn cell is inside the myelon, inside the spinal cord. That it is polio means gray part of the myelon. What is the gray part of the myelon? That is anterior horn cell, isn't it? So that is why it is called as anterior horn cell. That is why it is called as anterior poliomyelitis, isn't it? Anterior poliomyelitis. Okay. Why it is not polio, or why it is not an anterior horn cell disease?
People usually have asymmetrical patchy
And
involvement.
they
Very
will have.
good. That is one point. That is very, very important point. Okay. Then because if it was a transverse myelitis, you get all the muscles below that level will be affected. But in this case, you are getting a proximal involvement but distal sparing, isn't it? Upper limb also proximal involvement, upper sparing. So that is because if it was in this case, if it is a transverse myelitis, lesion will be above the C5 level. So then all the muscles below that level will be affected. But here C5-6 is affected. That is the proximal shoulder more. But C8-T1, that is the distal part, is spared. Similarly, L1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those are affected. But S1, 2, 3, L5, S1, 2, 3, that is the distal part is spared. But that sort of sparing you will not get in a case of transverse myelitis. Now in polio, you usually get an asymmetrical because anterior horn cells are affected in a asymmetrical manner initially, which is the chronic anterior horn cell disease.
Spinal muscular atrophy.
Spinal muscular atrophy. Where is the involvement in spinal muscular atrophy?
Anterior horn cell.
anterior hornsel, which part of the body it is more affected?
Um,
Proximal. Again, you get the
proximal.
proximal, because there again in a SMA, especially the infantile type of SMA, the distal part is spared, proximal part is affected. So there again, but usually it should have been asymmetrical, just like you get in an anterior, that is the poliomyelitis. But it is almost symmetrical in the SMA. Why? Because by the time you see the patients, there is an extensive involvement and all the anterior hornsels are affected. That is why you get that sort of involvement. Okay. But in polio, you get a segmental involvement or an asymmetric involvement. We use the term patchy in a case of polio, but this is almost symmetrical proximal, isn't it?
Yes.
And we use another terminology for this sort of anterior hornsel distribution, that is called as column distribution. Column distribution. That means the long column muscles will be affected in anterior hornsel disease, but the short column muscles will be affected more than the long column muscles, because well, if suppose a muscle is having multiple anterior hornsel getting involved, supplying, then that muscle will have a lesser involvement compared to a muscle which has got a lesser number of anterior hornsel involvement. So, for example, there can be an asymmetric involvement also. This sort of an asymmetry, patchy involvement, and a sort of a column type of distribution are seen in an anterior hornsel disease. And what is the other important point in anterior hornsel disease? It is purely motor, isn't it? Because in polio, you will not get any sort of a sensory involvement, but they can have myalgia, they can have a muscle pain may be there. Okay, but sensory is not there. So that is anterior hornsel. Then what about what is the next part of the peripheral nervous system?
Root, sir.
Before root?
Vertebropathy.
Before root, any other part is there?
Dorsal root ganglia.
Yes, okay, we'll come to the roots. Okay, roots. What will be the root manifestation? Usually, how the
Radical.
what is the classical disease that affects in children because of the root involvement?
What happens to root pain?
It is the GBS, is because it is a radical that is affected in GBS. So you think about the manifestation of a GBS in a child, but in an adult, root lesions are usually secondary to what?
Herpes zoster.
No, usually the commonest cause of a root involvement in an adult is the so-called intervertebral disc prolapse, IVDP, isn't it? And usually you get the root symptoms, that is root pain, especially radiating type of pain, which is increasing by coughing and straining, and the pain will be along the root like that. Okay, so this sort of a root symptom will be there. But in children, you get that is very rare, and the classical disease that affects in a child is GBS. So what are the so that means root, whenever you are asked about a root disease, the manifestation, you can say again it will be more of a proximal initially, but there can be distal involvement. It will be symmetrical, and sensory symptom will be there, but usually sensory signs will not be there. Okay, what is the next part of the neuraxis that can get affected? After the root, you can have a plexus involvement, isn't it? Plexopathy. After the plexus, only the nerve is forming. So there can be various type of plexus involvement. Can you give an example of a plexopathy or a plexus involvement?
Brachial plexus.
People can be born with a plexus involvement. That classical plexus involvement is
Erb's palsy.
Erb's palsy. People are answering. Arati has answered.
So Arati is answering everything.
Yes, plexopathy. In plexopathy, you have a characteristic distribution of a plexus. For example, the way by which the plexus is joining together. It won't be in a nerve root pattern. It won't be in a peripheral nerve pattern. It won't be in a peripheral neuropathy pattern. So you have a plexus pattern. There again, all of us know the Erb's palsy. That is a C5-6 root involvement we say, but it is the predominantly the upper part of the plexus is affected. The classical the policeman tip position. Again, we can't explain that position by a nerve involvement, isn't it? So that is the plexopathy. Then comes the peripheral nerve. Again, peripheral nerve, as we have mentioned, it can be peripheral polyneuropathy, peripheral neuropathy, or that means mononeuropathy or a mononeuropathy multiplex. Peripheral polyneuropathy, we already mentioned, it will be a distal. Usually, peripheral polyneuropathy will be a distal involvement. Okay, distal involvement. But the disease where the root is predominantly affected, more of a proximal involvement will be there. In peripheral, classical peripheral neuropathy, you get a distal involvement with the glove and stocking type of distribution that you remember. So they will have a sensory numbness, paresthesia in the distal part of the upper limb as well as the lower limb. Initially lower limb, then upper limb. Then if it is a nerve distribution, you will have involvement in the form of a peripheral nerve. And we all know about the median nerve involvement, medial nerve palsies. For example, when an injury happens because of a fracture of the femur or for the humerus, or the wrist drop that you get because of an injection in the radial groove. So that has got a characteristic manifestation. By that you can make a mononeuropathy diagnosis. And then what is the next part after the peripheral nerve?
Neuromuscular junction.
Junction. That is very easy. How will you diagnose it?
A diurnal variation of the weakness.
Yes, one diurnal variation. Then
Fluctuating
fluctuating
weakness, diurnal variation. Yes, very good.
Anything else? Usually the small muscles and active muscle, which is the most active muscle in our body, other than respiratory muscle, which is protected. But what is the other muscle? You are always blinking. You are always blinking. So usually they will have a ptosis. Usually they can have an eye movement abnormality. Most of the time, myasthenia will have a ptosis and an eye movement abnormality. That is the classical manifestation. Okay. So in this case, those manifestations are not there. What is the next part of the lower motor neuron?
Muscle.
Okay. What are the characteristic features of muscle?
There will be element type of weakness, but the reflexes
Very
will
good.
be preserved. Reflex will be preserved.
All in a muscle disease, reflexes will be preserved.
In
Later stage,
later
the
stages, it
reflexes
can
will
be
go.
lost.
See, what is the classical example of a muscle disease? Can you give an example of a classical muscle, of a acute muscle disease and a chronic muscle disease? Give two examples.
Muscular dystrophy, sir.
Muscular
What is the classical muscular dystrophy? You know,
Duchenne muscular dystrophy.
Duchenne muscular dystrophy. What is the classical symptomatology in Duchenne muscular dystrophy?
Hypertrophy of the muscles.
Oh, agreed. What is the sign?
Gower sign, sir.
Gower sign. Where do you get Gower sign?
When around a toddler, they will try to get from.
Simple. It is proximal weakness. So that means classically in a muscle disease, you get a proximal weakness. Okay. And as I have told you, because it is proximal weakness, their angle jerk will be sluggish. But the knee jerk will be sluggish. Their knee jerk will be sluggish. Okay. In a proximal muscle disease, that is in a Duchenne muscular dystrophy, knee jerk will be sluggish, but their angle jerk will be retained till the end. So that means in a peripheral neuropathy, you get a absent angle jerk, but in a peripheral neuropathy, in a muscle disease, you get a angle knee jerk will be absent and angle jerk will be retained. Okay, that is the classical way by which you will differentiate a motor muscle disease from a peripheral nerve disease. So in this case, child has a motor manifestation because proximal muscle weakness is there. She has difficulty getting up from sitting position, but you are localizing to the root or a radicals. Why it is not a muscle disease?
Absent angle reflex.
That is one point. Okay, very good. Any other point in this case?
Symmetric.
2 points you must say. Yes. Symmetric. Muscle disease will be symmetric. What? See, think about when you are thinking of a muscle disease, what else will not be there? muscle means it is purely motor, isn't it? You will not
We
get any
have sensory
sensory
symptoms.
manifestation. You will not get any sensory. In this case, there is sensory. Then one more point is most of the muscle diseases, facial muscles will be spared, except in certain facial muscle myopathy, for example, facioscapulohumeral muscular dystrophy or a myotonic dystrophy, you get a facial. Otherwise, in most of the muscle diseases, facial muscles are spared. So these are in favor of a points against a muscle disease in this point. So finally, where have you localized this patient to, in this case? Radicals, isn't it? These are radicals and predominantly motor radicals. Then how do you explain the sensory symptom in this case? So somebody was asking. Again, this is a radical involvement. Here we have to bring in the pathology also. Radical involvement is because of a demyelination, isn't it? And I told you that the paresthesia predominantly is produced by large fiber neuropathies. And so large fibers are myelinated, so it can be a demyelination of the nerve, and then demyelination can occur in a asymmetric manner, patchy manner also. So there may be a symptom, but again the myelination, the involvement will maybe in the proximal part itself, but the symptom are manifesting in the distal part only. Okay, so it can be because of the pathology. So you can explain by the pathology. Anyway, I think I request our Dr. Lakshmi to continue.
Okay, now very simple. As Sir has clearly told you how about the localization of the lesion. Grishma, as far as the pediatrician is concerned, for us, acute flaccid paralysis is a medical emergency.
Yes,
The
sir.
one thing which we'll have to differentiate between, is whether it's a case of Guillain-Barré syndrome or it's a case of transverse myelitis. Clearly, you have told us in a child who has, can you tell me how do you differentiate once again? How do you differentiate transverse myelitis from Guillain-Barré syndrome?
Transverse myelitis, they will have a sensory level,
Yes.
GERD sensation, and bowel and bladder involvement will be there.
Yes, very good.
And
Right. Whenever a child comes to you with hypotonia, absent reflexes, absent plantar or flexor plantar, with no bladder involvement, with facial palsy, the one and only diagnosis to you is going to be Guillain-Barré syndrome. Now, how are you going? Why I am telling it's a medical emergency?
we have to report.
No, reporting we can always do, and you need not worry about it. We are more worried about progression of the disease and involvement of the respiratory muscle. That's what we are more worried. So we would like to make a diagnosis, definitive diagnosis, though we have clinical findings to say it is a case of Guillain-Barré syndrome or AADP. What do we need for the diagnosis? How are we going to establish the diagnosis? Shall we proceed with the diagnosis, sir?
Narrow conditions.
Yes. How are we going to make a diagnosis of GBS? How are we going to confirm your diagnosis of Guillain-Barré?
We can do the nerve conduction study, ma'am.
Okay, nerve conduction study is the first. You want to do an LP first or a nerve conduction study first?
Nerve conduction study. LP, the albuminocytological dissociation will be there. An end of
albuminocytological dissociation. CSF protein more than
at least 10 cells.
What is the albumin level? CSF protein is more than 45 to 50.
45 to 50.
Yes, and cells with
less
what is
cells.
the normal CSF white cell count?
Less than 10 cells, ma'am.
Okay, less than 5 to 10 cells. Okay, that is increase in proteins with no increase in cells. That is what you call as albuminocytological dissociation. This phenomenon is seen in which week of the disease?
Second week, ma'am. At the end of first week.
In the second week. In 75 to 90% of the cases, it is seen in the second week. In the first week, you might not have this finding. So, as you rightly said, nerve conduction studies are going to help you. In the first week, how many percentage of cases nerve conduction studies will be positive? 90% of the cases in nerve conduction study, you can have a positive finding in nerve conduction study. And any other investigations you would like to do to confirm your diagnosis? Can contrast MRI help a child?
Yes, the root in Guillain-Barré syndrome, the root will be
in the first
tissue image.
What is the advantage? What is the advantage of contrast enhanced MRI in GBS?
It is early
Yeah, you're not going to do an LP. It's a non-invasive technique and it is useful in the first week itself. Any role for antibodies?
Yes, ma'am. In anti-gliadin antibodies will be positive in Miller-Fisher variant of.
Very good, excellent. Detection of serum GQ1B, maybe especially in GBS variants, these antibodies may be positive. So diagnosis is usually established by nerve conduction studies. Okay, what are the findings in nerve conduction studies? Not detailed. Just we are not neurologists. As pediatricians, what findings you expect in nerve conduction studies?
The latency,
delayed FNH responses.
Yes.
And prolonged latency. And
the latency will be prolonged, ma'am.
Okay, yes. Okay, so nerve conduction study helps you in making a diagnosis. Next step is, as a resident, you are there in the ward. You would like to know this child has got a progressive, for all 4 limb involvement, progressive illness this child has got. You would like to know whether this child has to be shifted to intensive care or can be managed in the ward itself. What are the indications for shifting the child to intensive care?
This child, if there is involvement of bulbar muscles, if the gag is
very good, bulbar palsy, yes, one. Next,
respiratory insufficiency, like if single breath count is less.
Yes, reduced vital capacity less than 20 ml per kg or a single breath count less than 10. Bulbar palsy, then
rapid progression of weakness.
Very good, rapidly progressive weakness. Then next point, flaccid quadriparesis by itself is an indication that the child might progress. Okay, significant autonomic stability. You are right. Flaccid quadriparesis, rapidly progressive weakness, reduced vital capacity less than 20 ml per kg, bulbar palsy, and significant autonomic instability. These are some of the indications for you to shift the child to intensive care. Now, okay, you're planning to shift the child to intensive care. By the time you would like to plan therapy also. Now, what are the modalities of therapy available for these children?
We can give IVIG, ma'am, intravenous.
Okay. There is only therapy available. Do you prefer plasmapheresis or IVIG?
Plasmapheresis.
You prefer plasmapheresis?
No, ma'am, IVIG. We'll prefer IVIG, ma'am.
You prefer why IVIG? Both are equally good. Why don't you prefer, especially in children? Why don't we prefer plasmapheresis? Why do we prefer IVIG? IVIG is easy to administer. It has no hazards, no serious side effects are going to be associated with it. Whereas plasmapheresis, how many times you will have to do in that child?
Yes, ma'am.
How many times you'll have to do? Probably in a week, you'll have to do 4 or 5 times.
3 to 5 cycles.
Procedure, it is associated with, especially in a child who has got a hemodynamic stability, it might be more cumbersome. You'll have to do plasmapheresis 4 to 5 times per week. Child can go in for hypotension. Child can have a lot of cardiovascular instability while on plasmapheresis. So irrespective, all of us prefer giving IVIG. But what is the problem with IVIG? Cost, very good. But when compared to its mortality, the cost is not much. What is the dose of IVIG we usually give?
400 milligram per kg per day for 5 days we can give.
You prefer that, or you giving 2 gram per kg you prefer?
We prefer to give 400 milligram per day.
Per kg for 5 days rather than 2 gram per kg.
Yeah.
Okay. Both are equally effective, but as you rightly said, 400 milligram per kilogram for 5 days is a little marginal better than 2 gram per kg. Okay. Now, what are the indications for urgent intubation in a child? Supposing you have shifted the child to IMCU, you have started the child on IVIG. Indications for urgent intubation and connecting the child to a ventilator. I am just talking to you in a pediatrician's perspective, sir. Sorry, forgive me, sir. Yes, what are the indications for urgent intubation?
Bulbar palsy.
Yes.
With risk for asthma.
No, by parameters. Clinical manifestations, you have already shifted the child to IMCU. Now, with what parameter findings or what?
Features of respiratory impending. ABG.
Yeah, ABG will show raised parameters.
PCO2, ma'am, if it is increasing more than 60.
Okay.
Vital
Yes.
capacity less than 20 ml per kg, or there's
Tidal volume when it's less than 5 ml per kg, your maximum inspiratory pressure is less than 30 centimeters. All these are given in tabular columns, and maximum expiratory pressure is less than 40 centimeters. And when your vital capacity is less than 20 ml per kg, these may be indications for urgent intubation in any child. Now, one simple thing, most of us are faced with this problem. When all IVIG is not indicated, that is more important for us to know. Instead of wasting lakhs of money. What are the IVIG and plasma exchanges are not indicated on what conditions?
If the weakness is non-progressive or if it is persisting for more than 4
Fantastic
weeks.
answer. Mild disease and non-progressive disease. Non-progressive disease. Then anything more? Can you add one more point?
More than 4 weeks. Weakness for more than 4 weeks.
That is okay. If it's after 4, there's no progression of the disease beyond that. Yes, very good. Yes. Then anything else? Ambulatory children. A child who's already ambulatory, we are not going to start. So again, I repeat, IVIG is not recommended or not useful in mild non-progressive disease, in ambulatory children, and children whose symptoms have already stabilized. Okay. Now, okay, fairly well. And severity of GBS, does it correlate with the long-term outcome? For example, child has been ventilated in the first 48 hours, you have ventilated the child. Does it correlate with the long-term outcome? No. Severity of illness, it indicates only the probable mortality during that part of time. It doesn't correlate with the long-term outcome. But poor prognostic factors, can you tell me what are all the poor prognostic factors in case of GBS? For example, this child who was 12 years old, it has got a better prognosis, or a child who is less than 2 years has got a better prognosis?
12 years.
Very young children have a bad prognosis. You're right. Your guesses are always right. Very young children, when they are quadriplegic, even after day 10, and most of these children who require ventilator support for a long time, they usually fare badly. Now, AFP class is never complete without knowing one important investigations which you didn't tell me, apart from nerve conduction study, probable MRI, antibody, CSF, cytoalbumin dissociation, one test which all of you are expected to perform in all case of AFP. I'll only two more questions for you. One is this one more test, what you will have to do. And next one is, what is the recent reset IAP schedule and the national schedule for polio vaccination? These two things you should tell. Yes.
Stool collection.
Yes.
AFP surveillance and stool collection.
Yes, stool collection.
Two samples, ma'am. Between
what hours apart?
24 to 48 hours.
Okay.
And
yes.
8 gram or size of a thumb we have to collect.
Yes. Okay. And we'll have to always intimate, as you rightly said. You always have to intimate. Now, can you tell? I'll ask you a few questions about the vaccines. It's very mandatory. Because now, have you eradicated polio?
No.
Yes or no?
No. Have you eradicated polio?
Have you eradicated polio?
No, ma'am.
Yes.
In India, it is eradicated, ma'am.
Okay. Yes, we have India. Yes, I'm asking about India. Sorry. Yes, have we? Yes. Now, can you tell me the schedule followed by IAP schedule followed by for polio vaccination?
At birth, OPV, 0 dose we will give. Yes. At 6, 10, 14 weeks, IM, IPV we had to give.
Yes.
And the booster, first booster at 1.5, 16 to 18 months. And the second booster at 4 to 6 years of age. IM.
Very excellent. This is the IAP schedule. But you are supposing I am working in a government hospital where fractional doses of fractional dose. What do you mean by fractional dose? Intradermal doses are given. You feel these intradermal doses of polio vaccine are as efficacious as your IM, IPV, 3 doses which are given along with the boosters. Given a chance, what would you prefer? If IPV, now standalone IPV is freely available, what would you prefer?
Standalone IM we will give, ma'am.
You prefer the IAP schedule rather than the government schedule. Yes, right. You're right, because the government schedule, the UAP schedule is there because of the paucity of the vaccines. We didn't have enough 200 million doses we required, and we didn't have enough doses. And we started with the ID dose, intradermal doses at 6 and 14 weeks. At any given point, intradermal doses are inferior compared to your standard IM doses of IPV. So if the patient has an option, at least a single dose of IM IPV has to be done. This is the main strategy which has to be evolved for polio eradication strategy. This is the main strategy which is going to be involved. Now the wild polio virus has been evaluated. What is the important threat all of us are going to face now? What do you mean by VAP and what do you mean by CVDP?
VDPP, vaccine-derived paralytic polio virus, that is caused by type 2 polio strain.
Okay.
So that's why
Now we have stopped type 2. No, we have switched over to bivalent vaccine. So
Right,
that's not
okay.
going to be a threat. So that is not going to be a threat for us. So what is going to be the biggest threat for it is your
Vaccine associated polio virus.
vaccine-derived polio viruses are going to be a threat for us. So the carrying home point from my side of it is, apart from giving GBS, immunoglobulin, indications for immunoglobulin, all that is, give at least 1 IM dose of IPV vaccine to all children to prevent CVDP. That may be my final comment. And if both of you from, I think that we are running short of time, and our time is over. Both the postgraduates, Sri Lakshmi and Grishma, you did a wonderful job. You answered nearly all the questions asked by me. Probably Dr. Kunju sir was he was a pediatric neurologist. Some of the questions, but otherwise you did a very great job. And I thank Dr. Kunju sir for having given having completed this session. Thank
Hello.
you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Hello. Hello. I think
Yes,
we just conclude by telling them that because the most important points they have to remember in taking a neurological history is that I am having a very heavy rain here. That is why the sound is interrupted. Okay. So the point is that from the history you would understood that the point that you have to just remember the clinical examination points. For example, when you are doing a motor system examination, cranial examination, sensory system examination. So all those things you ask from the history itself, because most of the time in a child you may not be able to examine the patient, especially when you are doing in your board exam. So you may not be able to examine the child properly. So you take but don't spend too much time on history also, because many times I have seen students spending more time. So don't waste time in taking a unnecessary elaborate. So you ask the targeted points, targeted. So you once you see this, as in this case, if it is a lower limb weakness with upper limb weakness, then ask for a facial weakness. That is very, very important. And then again ask for an upper eye movement weakness. Eye movement is not there. Then you ask for a respiratory like that. So that is most important. Then additionally, because in neurology, don't forget the sensory symptoms. Then as here we have mentioned, don't forget to examine the fundus, because in this case also, in GBS also, we know that papilledema, papillitis and other manifestation can occur. And then a clinical examination also, you start with the bulk itself, whether you look for a wasting or anything, and then the reflexes should be examined, but again appropriately. You look at the clinical manifestation, and depending upon that, you look at the clinic, the reflexes, because sometimes you may get the reflex, you may not get, you may get it upper motor neuron, the upgoing plantar, downgoing neuron. Don't get dejected. If one is having a hemiplegia, typical hemiplegia, you know that it must be an upgoing plantar. If it is a unilateral hemiplegia with a opposite facial palsy, it will be lower motor neuron. Don't worry. You tell that this lower motor neuron. Don't hesitate. So depending upon the syndrome, then you can say that you can look at the findings, and you can confidently say about the findings. And then in this case, I try to localize it. You try to localize it and think about the common in examination. I know that the people will be getting a clue from either from the skill assistant or from your colleagues, but don't think about that diagnosis alone. That may be the diagnosis, but think about all the possible. As in this case, I have asked about a transverse myelitis. Madam has asked about the snake poisoning. Remember all these things and give a negative history depending upon that. So I think I must thank Dr. Nagaraja and the DAP as well as the Chennai IAP for allowing us to do this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So nice of you to have very good discussion. Extremely think we are recollecting what we have missed it also. Dr. Lashmi and Dr. Mohammad Kunju sir has spoke very well. I think our president sir is waiting already. And I think we'll start. Actually, there is a one between 15 minutes. There is actually clippings of vaccines are available that we will do afterwards. No problem. All the PGs, please wait for the vaccines by Dr. Dakshayani afterwards. First, we'll start the next session. Dakshayani, where are you? Start it.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammad Kunju sir, and thank you, Lakshmi ma'am, for that brainstorming session. We were literally drained. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. I now take this opportunity to welcome our President, Central IAP, Professor Dr. Piyush Gupta. Welcome, sir.
Yeah. Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
I was traveling. I could not come in time.
Then Ravi Kumar is answering. Ravi Kumar is answering, not Piyush Gupta, please. Dr. Piyush, I saw you. Sir?
Yeah.
Dr. Piyush Gupta was in exam hall. He said he will join.
No, he talked to me. He
Yeah,
joined already. I said it is 6 o'clock. I think what you do is, Dakshayani,
Yes, sir.
Ravi Kumar has joined. You can ask Ravi Kumar to have a few words. He is from
Yes,
Central Zone Vice President. Dr. Ravi
I now
Kumar.
request Dr. Ravi Kumar, Vice President.